So a couple of days ago, I dropped a video about the new M2 Macbook Air, a bit of a buyer's guide if you will, and a lot of you were asking, would this be a good MacBook for students? Well, let's ramble.
Hold up, place go wild when I pull up. They all on me like it once.
Hey, what's up guys? It's great to see you all again. And if you're new here, I'm Patrick, and this is where I ramble about tech and other stuff. So like I said in the intro, a lot of people are interested to know whether the new M2 MacBook Air would be a good computer for students or maybe even the perfect MacBook. And with back to school only a couple of weeks away, that is of course a very valid question. So let's get into it. Now, obviously, we don't have the actual machine in our hands just yet, so we're basing ourselves today on how this MacBook performs on paper. Having said that, I did order the base model M2 MacBook Air because that will most likely be the configuration most students will be interested in, mainly for budgetary reasons. But it has been my experience that base model Macs can be very good devices for a lot of users. So I plan to really put this thing to the test for you guys to see how much we can squeeze out of the least expensive configuration. So if you're interested in following up on that or any of the other Apple stuff I publish on a regular basis, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of that. Right, so back to the question. Is the M2 MacBook Air the perfect computer for students? Well, let's go over a couple of things and see if we can come to a clear conclusion that can help you with your purchasing decision. First of all, there is of course the new design. It has been completely updated away from the old wedge design of the M1 and the Intel MacBook Air and more towards the flat MacBook Pro design. However, even though it looks like a MacBook Pro, it is considerably smaller and lighter, even compared to the 14-inch MacBook Pro. The Pro is about 0.6 inches thick, whereas the Air is only 0.44 inches. And it's also 0.8 pounds lighter, which is of course a meaningful difference considering you'll be carrying this device with you between classes and pretty much everywhere you go. It also comes in a wider range of colors. We have silver, starlight, space gray, and midnight, which is the one I ordered. Usually I'm 100% team space gray, but I want this thing to look and feel like a new device. So I decided to go with the midnight for a change. The M2 MacBook Air comes with two Thunderbolt 3 ports, which is of course convenient if you plan to hook it up to an external display when you get back to your room. But this time it also comes with the new MagSafe 3 charging port. Now that last bit is important because even though on paper the M2 MacBook Air has an impressive 18-hour battery life, we all know it can drain a lot faster than that if we use our devices all day long at full brightness, etc. And with the new MagSafe port, you will be able to charge your battery to 50% in as little as 30 minutes, which means you can give it a meaningful boost between classes, so you never have to worry about being without a charge. Apple did keep the 3.5mm jack on this MacBook, so you can keep using your trusty old cans without any issues. But if you're not using your headphones, you can also enjoy amazing audio because the M2 MacBook Air comes with a quad speaker system as opposed to a dual speaker system on the M1 MacBook Air. And it will support spatial audio when playing music or supported video, so you can be sure to fill up your room with quality audio. And of course, the crisp audio we will be getting from this new MacBook will also come in very handy for things like online lectures and Zoom meetings with fellow students, as well as the 3 high-quality mics this machine is packing. I found that holding online meetings on any of the newer MacBooks without headphones is an absolute treat, and people have been asking me what mic I'm using when I'm really just using the internal mics on the new MacBooks, and that to me is definitely a killer feature regardless of whether you're a professional or a student. And let's not forget about the webcam, of course, which has now finally been upgraded from 720 to 1080p. It's about time, and I don't know what took Apple so long to finally join the HD party, but it's here and it will deliver a significant improvement in video quality. Now, these are all very nice and useful features and upgrades, but the big elephant in the room is of course the actual performance. We're talking about the best computer for students, and for most students, budget will be a major factor in the purchasing decision. So what are we looking at in terms of performance? Well, of course, we now have the brand spanking new M2 chip, which again, on paper, compared to the M1 chip, delivers you twice the bandwidth, 18% faster CPU, and 35% better graphics performance. Not only that, the new media engine will be able to play back multiple streams of 8K footage. Now, that last bit might not be super relevant for most students, but it does give you an idea what this new chip might be capable of. Anyway, the chip is a chip. It's the same M2 chip no matter what configuration you choose. However, there are some caveats to that, which we will get back to in a second. So in terms of RAM, the MacBook Air starts at 8 gigabytes, but you can bump it up all the way to 24 gigabytes, as opposed to the maximum of 16 gigs on the M1 MacBook Air. Of course, this comes at a considerable extra cost, so the question will be, how much unified memory do you really need? Now, I can promise you that for all of your day-to-day student usage, running Office apps, having a couple of browser tabs open, running video calls, streaming lectures, and of course watching some YouTube and Netflix, 8 gigabytes will be more than enough to perform all of those tasks without lag, without stutter. The question is, what else do you plan to do with your MacBook Air? I'm super old, so when I was a student, the way to earn some extra cash was to work at a bar or flip burger somewhere. But these days, there are much better ways to make some extra cash to finance that student life, which a lot of you are already wisely doing. I know a lot of students have YouTube channels these days, maintain a profitable Instagram page, do some freelance graphic design work, you name it. In those cases, you might want to look at investing a little more budget if you can in upgrading your machine. Why? Well, the absolute base model will give you 8 gigabytes of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. And again, while that will be enough for most students, there might be some performance issues with some of the tasks we just described. And if the performance of the M2 chip on the MacBook Air will be similar to the performance on the M2 MacBook Pro, there have been some reported issues related to the base configuration by channels like Max Tech. Check out their video if you're interested to know about that in more detail. But the reported problem is that the fact that there is a single NAND chip on board of these new M2 machines, combined with a lower 8 gigabytes configuration, that will mean a slower RAM swap when the machine does need to dip into that storage for more RAM. It happens when you open up a lot of tabs and run several heavy apps like photo or video editors at the same time. On top of that, the fact that this machine is ultra portable also means there is a higher chance of thermal throttling. The chassis is much thinner and these MacBook Airs have no fan, so heat dissipation will be a challenge. Therefore, there's a real chance that performance will be throttled to avoid the machine from getting too hot. Again, these things are all based on theoretical performance, and I will be testing all of this in the real world as soon as the new MacBook arrives in the studio. So all things considered, here's my purchasing advice for students. If you want a machine that will serve you well for the entire duration of your studies and you plan to use it for typical student tasks, I would say you can confidently get the base model, not worry about it. However, if you plan to use this thing for more than that, if you're gonna use the M2 MacBook Air for student tasks, as well as things like video editing or graphic design, I would advise you at the very least to upgrade either to 16 gigabytes of RAM or to upgrade the internal storage to at least 512 gigabytes. Or ideally, if you can afford it, upgrade both the RAM and the storage. Personally, I wouldn't worry about spending money on additional cores unless you're planning on doing things like serious 3D work, but at that stage, you'd probably be better off looking at a MacBook Pro anyway. Having said all that, I do feel the need to mention the M1 MacBook Air as a perfectly viable alternative if you're on a tight budget and even the base model M2 MacBook Air will be too big of an expense for you. And let's be honest, it's not cheap. You can find a refurbished M1 MacBook Air for as low as $800 if you're lucky, and those machines are still really, really good. You can easily get a few more good years of use out of the M1 MacBook Air as well. So if you're really minding your budget and you're wondering if you really need to splurge on that new M2 MacBook Air, my answer would be no, you don't. You should just get the M1. Guys, I hope this video was useful to you. If it was, please get one of these. It really does help the channel. Subscribe for more content. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one.